Okay. Mark, can you see that okay?
I can. Well done. Yep.
All right. So we're in presentation mode. Now, with me being in presentation mode, I can't actually see people coming in. So I might just wait another minute or two before I get started.
I think if you go show participants, even in presentation, you don't get to see that.
No, I can't see that. Yep. Well, Howard's just ringing me, so I'll just take this call.
Yep. No, we've still got a couple of minutes.
All right. Sorry, I lost everyone there for a minute.
We can all see everyone in there, Tony.
Right, great. So we might make a start.
Let's do that.
All right. All right, good morning, everybody. Before I hand over to Mark, I'll just remind you that of what they call now Zoom etiquette. So if you can keep yourself on mute, that'd be great. There's some function buttons on Microsoft Teams. You can put your hand up. You can ask questions at any time, but we do have an opportunity at the end to ask questions also. So hopefully this will take no longer than an hour, so we'll get right into it.
Yep, terrific. Thank you, Tony, and thank you everyone for joining. And as Tony's mentioned a couple of times now, for those that have been on for a couple of minutes, we will be sending this link out. So for those of you who know others who can't join us, please encourage them to catch up. And they can then, of course, ask questions, because it's an important part of the communication. It's two-way. So look, very quickly, what we're going to be tracking through this morning, we'll go through the Lion Dairy and Drink sale and where that's got to. Tony will talk to the pricing. So that's an important piece, clearly for everyone, but nice for you all to understand how we got to where we got, and the changes to some of the structure there. We'll give you a very brief business update where things are at for DFMC. We still haven't quite finished the audit, so we're really not in a position to be doing it with completeness, if you like. Obviously, our annual report will be put together, and you'll all get copies of that. So a very detailed update is weeks away. We'll quickly touch on the Christmas functions. That whole space clearly is changing rapidly, or has changed, and we'll talk to that briefly. Tony will talk to the multi-year contracts and where that's at for the South East Queensland and New South Wales as well. Little update on gate signage, the AGM and what format that's looking like taking, and as Tony mentioned, we have a specific section at the end here for questions, but please, we'll keep this pretty informal. So if any of you do have a question along the way, you might see in the middle of your screen, if you bring your cursor to the center of the screen, a little toolbar will pop up, and there's a raise your hand button icon. So if you do want to ask a question along the way, please use that. And we can, address things as we go, if that makes good sense. So slide along to the next one, Tony.
Now, Mark, I can't see the Teams because I'm in presentation mode. I can't see the Teams app, so I won't be able to see if anyone puts their hand up. So if you can keep an eye on that for us, it'd be great.
That will be my job. All right. Just some key sort of milestones along the way for the sale journey, folks, but we'll add a little bit as we can, a little bit of context and colour. So it was a long time ago, if we all recall, back in September 18, that Kieran announced they were selling off the Lion Dairy and Drinks business. So that was a long and tortuous journey. As you know, early-ish, they sold off the cheese businesses, having said that they wanted to sell the business in its entirety. It did, however, make some sense for Saputo's offer to be taken up. It was both geographically isolated, so Tasmanian-based, Tasmanian factory, Tasmanian-sourced milk, and it has a very different sales and distribution channel. So that was all sold and comfortably separated off. And then much later that year, Kieran announced that they had entered into an arrangement, an agreement with Mongnu. So at that stage, of course, they needed to qualify the announcement with subject to further approvals, which the ACCC came through reasonably quickly early the following year, or this year. And then COVID hit, and that has changed a whole lot of stuff. And I'll add Mark Kebble's view in here, but so this is not a formal Lion view or DFMC particularly either. But COVID changed things to the extent that the geopolitical landscape and Australia's relationship with China started to change pretty dramatically. And there's some well-known battlegrounds in that space. Barley, there's some beef abattoirs that have been denied their export rights. More recently, wine. So the little battle has taken shape, and it really changed the colour of what FIRB were deciding. We read that the next part of the journey, which is FIRB, the Foreign Investment Review Board, actually did approve the transaction, but ultimately the decision is the Treasurer's, and ultimately then that becomes somewhat political. From an apolitical position, DFMC supported the transaction, so we acknowledge that that's not everyone's personal views about whether the Chinese were appropriate owners and all of the things are, we all fully understand that, but from a commercial perspective, they are a dairy business, and Lion / Kirin clearly aren't. Their focus is elsewhere. So they're a big dairy business in big export markets. So if the entity was to grow, it has extraordinary connections into parts of the world that we could see being beneficial. So from an apolitical perspective, we did support the transaction. That said, it's been withdrawn and we just got to move on. So the withdrawal was a joint announcement from Mengniu and Lion. And look, again, we understand that there was sort of back communications from the Treasurer saying he was unlikely to approve it. So the Treasurer didn't have to make a formal announcement, which is kind of odd. And then there was some vague words used, but again, not directly attributed to the Treasurer about food security and the national interest and phrases like that. So we just have to respect the decision and move on, as Lion do. You will also now have read, undoubtedly, that there is quite a bit of media about the business being back on the market. And more than that, a couple of 2 or 3 Australian entities are being mentioned in dispatches as likely suitors. I suppose the upside of an Australian entity is it doesn't require FIRB approval. There will be some ACCC issues looked at by whoever buys it, but the foreign investment issue is taken out, and that was clearly the stumbling block. So look, we have heard that that Bega and a business called Tanara are interested. We understand also from discussions around the edges that both of those entities, it's real, it's not just media speculation, that they are interested. To the extent that Lion are accepting these offers, again, we only really have the media to lean on here. They do want to make a quick sale. They don't want to go through the sale fatigue of that first year, and then the wait has taken a great toll on the business in many ways. And so if it doesn't resolve itself reasonably quickly, it may well not this time around. But the parties that are interested are real and have, on the face of it, capabilities and money, etc. So it's a watch this space, and we'll continue to keep you updated. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those now. Otherwise, we can move along. All right, hey. No hands up.
Hey, Mark, I haven't got the hands up thing. It's Bob Kelsey here, Mark.
Hello, Bob.
What about Norco? Are they sniffing around, or what's the go with Norco?
Yeah, there's been some media about Norco's interest, most recently a couple of days ago, where Andrew was in fact quoted about that. So yeah, Norco have, when I say formally, but they have been directly quoted in the media as expressing interest in the northern assets. Yeah, so I would probably, my view or my commentary on that, Bob, is that they don't have the ability to buy the whole business. And a large part of what's being sold is not just the stainless steel, but the brands. And I'm not sure, and I say that meaning I am not sure, I'm not trying to challenge the notion, but how Lion would go selling part of their brand. For example, dairy farmers, yeah?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit complicated, I think, how
Okay.
someone would own the factories and that brand in the region. I mean, it can be done. Clearly, there's some fancy financial minds can be thrown at those challenges to resolve it. But yeah.
Yeah, Mark, Andrew here. I'll make a couple of quick comments.
Please.
First and foremost, I should mention that we did support the sale, obviously wholeheartedly, and the letter that was written to the Treasurer from DFMC last week, whilst it had my signature on it, it was largely written by Mark and John McKillop. And I just found out from Kathy yesterday, and I haven't even told you, Mark, that the letter was accepted with great impact. And the word that Kathy got, it was a very good letter that did have some weight to it. So on behalf of the co-op, thank you for doing that. The article about Norco, I was a little naive, and I was sold a bit of a pup the other day. I got a call from a journalist at about 7:45 on Monday morning, so you can imagine I was still running around the dairy, finishing up and feeding calves and cleaning buckets, etc., as we do. And this journalist asked me a range of questions around the industry and Norco and Bega, etc. And he was really angling for a Norco story, and I did not give it the time that I should have, and I got suckered in a little bit. And whilst I support Norco, and I think they are a great company and have done very well, some of the things that was in that article wasn't actually what I said or didn't mean to say. So I'll learn from that. I think Norco could be involved in some of the line assets moving forward, but they would need a partner, and just how that would work could be messy, as I just don't think that Norco could find the money to buy the whole thing wholes bolus. And I'm very confident that the Lion board want to sell the business as a whole and not do the whole stranded assets thing. So probably early days. I think as a DFMC board and chairman, we definitely support other Australian co-ops, and it would be great to have Norco involved, but exactly how that plays out, I think, might just be a step too far at the moment. So thank you, Mark.
No, that's good, Andrew. Thank you.
There was a question, Mark, came through from Howard. Who is Tanara?
Who is Tanara?
Yeah,
I can answer that. Tanara is it's an investment vehicle, Howard, and everyone obviously. Tanara Capital. You can go to their website and understand what they do. So they'll be leading the transaction on behalf of, I guess, some of their own money, but Australian super funds. They are led by a chap called John Wiley, who's a very well-known investment banker. He's sort of in some ways moved on from very direct investment banking and is doing a lot of philanthropy and sort of unpaid gigs, like he's chairman of the Australian Sports Commission, etc. So he's become reasonably high profile outside investment banking. But yes, no, I do know that they're off there. The offer that they are creating is real.
all right. Good.
All right.
Keep moving on. So I'll take over. I'll talk a little bit about the mandatory code. I think everyone's well and truly heard about the mandatory code. We're now operating under the code, which we believe is a good thing. So as we know, in North Queensland, we had the freight recovery model. The changes to the code meant that we couldn't do that. So it was viewed as a retrospective fee. So that was taken off the table early on in our negotiations with Lion. We soon came to the agreement that because all but about 5 or 6 farms were off contract this year, that it was an easy option for us, but also we have a bit of an underlying view that when we have a large group of farms coming off contract in a region, that it helps us with our negotiations on milk price. So this year we made the decision that all farms would have to have an updated contract, and we went through that process. To be honest, it went, from our point of view, I think it went really well. Using DocuSign was a good process from our point of view. We've got all our contracts stored in one location. They all came in at, all within sort of a couple of weeks, which is sort of, from a code compliant point of view, is what we needed. So that part from our point of view was good. I've had some feedback from a few people about the process, some positive, some negative, but I think something that we will continue to use into the future. The code itself, the Agricultural Minister made an announcement last week that there will be a review into the dairy code and the compliance around the dairy code as part of a wider ACCC review being conducted over a 3-month period, which I think is to be concluded towards the end of November. So DFMC will be putting a submission into that code, into that inquiry, and probably Mark and I will have a little bit to do with it as we're sitting on the review committee for the dairy code, the consultative committee. So we'll know a little bit more about that in coming weeks, I'm sure. Onto pricing this year. Look, it was a very much a different year from our point of view. Not having face-to-face meetings was different, but I don't think it held us back too much. Sometimes it's nice to eyeball people when you're negotiating with them. It was probably a strange eyeballing people through a screen, but it's something I think that we've all got used to. DFMC did take a slightly different approach this year, where Mark and I did a lot of the negotiating with 2 of Lion staff members. So Murray took a back seat as well this year, right until sort of the last minute or the 11th hour. So we did a lot of work with Trevor King and Paul Rees, who's Howard's boss. So in terms of Far North Queensland, our initial positions, I guess, were that Lion's position is that they did not want to change the milk price in Far North Queensland. In fact, they were proposing a slight drop and not including the Dairy Pride program. And DFMC's position was effectively for a 6.5 cent a litre price rise, and our view was that we wanted a equal price to the Central Queensland farmers. That's where we think the ballpark was. And as you can see in the picture, I've got a picture of the Grand Canyon there. So that's what it felt like. Both parties were a long way from where we wanted to be. So DFMC actually withdrew from the discussions, and then we came to the agreement that we would park Far North Queensland and circle back around to it. So it's sort of the first step, I guess, of a mediation process was. So we parked North Queensland for about a 3 or 4 week period, which is something that we haven't really done before, but we felt that we had to do it. So when we circled back around, this is where we got to. So in terms of our base pricing, we agreed to move to a skewed base pricing model. Lion were and still are worried about having too much milk in the region. I don't know at the moment how milk flow is going, but I think there's no milk coming south. I haven't heard, but someone can correct me if there is. So where we got with base pricing is split into two 6-month periods: $6.52 and $9.78, or 57.4 cents a litre at the reference litre for the first 6 months. Second 6 months, $7.05 and $10.58, or 62.1 cents at the reference litre.
Tony, we have just started sending some milk south.
Right, okay, no worries. Thanks, Howard. All right, so additional on top of the base price, there was a change in the productivity payment. So there was a slight increase in that productivity payment, and that was to counteract the dropping off of the defined volume incentive, or the contract incentive that was there. The quality incentive in the end was unchanged. There was some proposals to change quality, but we feel that our system is very fair, and we believe that it's well understood by our members. It's something that's been in the system for probably 15 to 20 years, and I don't see that there's a need to change it from a marketplace point of view at this stage. Maybe the pricing might change, quality, the actual incentive price, but in terms of changing our levels of requirement, I don't see there's a big need for it at this stage. Obviously, Dairy Pride for Profit is still in there at 2 cents a litre. The stop charge is unchanged, and then the retail levy was committed to by the retailers for another 12 months, and that is paid as per their supermarket cycle. So what all that meant was this year we'll pay an average price of 67.2 for the region, with a range for farms of 60.59 up to 74.5. In terms of those of you who might work in kilos of milk solids, that's $9.40 per kilo milk solids, with a range of $8.98 to $9.75. This year versus last year, we are looking at about a 3.5 cent a litre increase overall. So we go back to where we started. Lion effectively wanted to drop the milk price by a cent. We wanted it to go up 6.5. So we've met somewhere in the middle. Is that what we wanted? No, it's not what we wanted. We still believe that to have a long and sustainable, viable industry in the north, we need to have a mechanism to sit where that price continues to increase along with costs. But that's an industry-wide problem. So we know that there's other work going on behind the scenes across the industry to change the whole milk pricing system in Australia. So it's probably another conversation for another day. But before I move off milk pricing, has anyone got any questions? If you don't, we can leave them to the end. But happy to pause for a minute if anyone's got any questions. All right, well, we'll move forward. Mark, I'll hand back over to you for your couple of business updates before I come back and talk about a bit of marketing stuff.
Let's do that. All right. Thank you, Tony. So look, this is a very brief business update. We are at the point of literally in this current week finishing the audit process with our accountants, and from there we can go through and pull together the final annual report and all the detail that goes with that. So so this will be necessarily very brief and high level, and some of the numbers, as I say there, pending audit completion adjustments. As we mentioned in the last meeting in May, we did budget for an operating loss this year, and that was because we've, as you all well know now, we've got a reduced aggregation fee, or the fee paid by line for us pulling together the milk around the country and providing the services that we do. So that's been much reduced. We budgeted to have an operating loss. In the end, we are substantially better than budget, and a lot of that's has got to do with COVID. Some of the numbers both ways, I must say, positive and negative variances are COVID related. So we also receive lower dividends from our share portfolio because of COVID. Some of the banks, for example, have massively cut back their dividend payments this year. On the positive side, of course, though, because we can't travel as a board or as staff, we have saved a lot for the travel, and of course the conference that was held in November was a much pared back event. We think very successful, and we'll talk a little bit later on about the shape and feel for this year's conference, which was scheduled for Far North Queensland. Sadly, also COVID impacted. If we go across to the next slide, so our assets. At the end of the year, our equities valuation, so the share portfolio valuation, was down a bit, down to 11.8. You don't have to be a dedicated student of financial markets to understand that the COVID world has impacted the economy and many of our shares. But, I think the point I want to make here is that not as much as we would have all perhaps imagined. So at the end of Feb, the 28th of Feb, our portfolio was worth 12.7, and that's roughly the peak, I think we can say, of things. So the market was charging along, and then a month later, COVID started to really impact. So yes, it's gone down, but it's still in front of where it was a year prior. So yes, it's been impacted, but not as desperately as we all might have thought through some of that traumatic, media portrayals. We also, though, have a bunch, $5 million of money in term deposits or cash equivalents. Look, this is really just to balance the equities, which are inherently more risky. The downside is that interest rates are super low, and our term deposits are earning very little for us at the moment. We do have some money sitting with Franklin, who are our advisors, our investment advisors. So we've got a cash management account with Macquarie. So we've transferred a bit of money into there so that we are ready to invest should opportunities present themselves or our advisors recommend that. At the moment, they're actually saying that the market's arguably overvalued, that there is more downside than upside in the market at the moment. So we're not launching just yet. There's been a couple of little dabbles, but so there's a preparedness to invest more, but we want to invest on market weakness, not not what many are saying is strength or overvalued. So from a business perspective, we're all actually in pretty good shape. But that said, the COVID world has had impacts both positively and negatively on our business. Things like this meeting, for example, just they're not quite the same, are they? But we're making do.
Mark, Andrew here. I should just make a couple of comments. Can you just go back one slide just very quickly?
Tony can do that for us.
If for the first 10 years of DFMC's life, post the sale 2008, DFMC received $1 million from Lion as an aggregation fee to run the co-op and run the communication system and a few bits and pieces. Now, we didn't spend $1 million, but the former board did spend $1 million. It probably cost sort of $800,000 to run the co-op, or $900,000 or so. And they had a little bit of money put aside, but they managed to do things like that subsidised nutrition program, and we did a lot of stuff with Curry Communication, and we ran a pretty big AGM with lots of ward reps, etc. The new MSA that we have now, this extension we call it, our aggregation fee is only $300,000, and we've got to do a bit of our own in-house accountancy. So we are going to have to run out a lot. And it's just important that we're really clear. The board needs to be really open and honest about that. So we do have to dig into the savings and the capital that we've had put aside. Now, it's important that we stem the loss, that we be as frugal as we possibly can and save money where we can, but you can't sort of save your way to grace or glory, I think JB used to say. You've got to still spend money to be efficient and effective and be a good representative for the farmers. So it's a balancing act, and in question time, I'd love to take questions on this topic, or if people want to ring James or Tony, Mark, myself at some stage just to voice their thoughts or ask questions, we would appreciate it, because it is your money, and we just need to be really clear about the direction that we're going, and everyone is comfortable with that. Thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you, Andrew. All right, well, we can move on to the next slide, Tony, which I think we're starting to get into some of the marketing stuff, aren't we? Yeah.
We are. So, look, marketing's something that we've been expressing to Lion, I suppose, is one word we could use, that, we feel that potentially there's some ground there to be made up. So they're having a bit of a crack at the moment. Got to say that certainly I'm seeing lots of ads in southeast Queensland. I'm seeing a lot on social media. I'm not quite sure what's going on in far north Queensland apart from what we've got here. So I've got two little clips to play. So one is the ad, which is a national ad. So I'll do that first. Let's see if I can bring this up.
No sound, Tony.
Okay.
In the sharing mode, is the audio share with...
Good on you.
Yeah, for some reason it's gone off. All right, we'll try again.
At the bottom of that video on the bottom right corner with a little unmute thing.
Yeah, okay. We'll try this time.
Here's where our story begins, on an Australian dairy farm. And here's our next generation of Aussie dairy farmer, passionately continuing the 120-year tradition of care. Here comes Warren, just a little early as usual. And here's where we give everything one last check, or two, before our milk gets here and here, to nourish local communities and be enjoyed by everyone, everywhere. Dairy farmers, here's to good.
All right. So hopefully you heard it that time.
We did. Well done.
All right. Well, so that's the TV ad. I'll now play the radio ad, which I think you guys would be familiar with.
Hi, I'm Greg, a dairy farmer's milk farmer in far north Queensland. My great-grandparents started this dairy and it's been a part of my life ever since. My wife Bronwyn and I have 7 children who are all passionately involved in the dairy industry. My eldest 4 all work in dairy farms in our local community. We're proud to be one of the families that provide Dairy Farmers branded milk. Dairy Farmers, here's to good.
So did that come through? Did everyone hear that, Mark?
We did, yes. Yep. Well done.
Great. God, I love it when technology works. So just a couple of slides there of a few close-ups of the flyers and advertising material and promos that are around at the moment in Queensland. So look, I think it's good to see Lion progressing down that track. It's something that we've talked about for quite some time, and it's certainly proudly made in Malanda is a good addition. Okay, Christmas functions. I'm happy to talk about this, Mark.
Please.
Yep. So look, it still is our intention to do Christmas functions this year. Obviously, in North Queensland, we will partner with Lion, but it's probably going to look a little bit different, or potentially look a little bit different. We may have to do something outdoors so that we can cater for the larger number of people, or we may have to do multiple events. So it's something it's something that we still want to do and hope to do, but we'll see what Anastasia has to say about it closer to the event. Mark, I'll let you talk about gate signs in the AGM.
Rightio. So look, it's time to refresh some of our gate signs, farm gate signs. When we did a little bit of an audit, if you like, around the country, there was a huge variety in place. We've had a number of farms come on board, and through the sale process, quite understandably, we couldn't get any of the Lion signs. So these will be put up. They'll complement the Lion signs with the brands, etc. there. But it's important that we have our own identity to the extent that that's who we are, and it needs to be visible right around the country. So we're going to be getting these to you in the coming weeks. Slide on. So the AGM, I think, notwithstanding what Tony has just said about Christmas functions, the AGM is a different a different beast, because we will have a lot of folk travelling from other regions, directors in the south, etc. And it was scheduled to be in Far North Queensland, but with all of the uncertainty, it is far simpler if we plan to have the AGM online, similar to this. The piece that we just haven't quite nailed down is the voting system. Now, again, there's all sorts of options here. It's not that there isn't a platform that we can use. There are plenty. We just have to identify the most appropriate, the one that couples most seamlessly with Teams, because the AGM has some important functions, and voting, of course, is a part of that. So, so again, we won't be physically attending in Far North Queensland. We have postponed that. So still on the FNQ cycle, and I guess still your turn. Let's hope this world tidies itself up and we're all up there next year.
All right, well, that's about it from us. Very happy to throw it open for questions. So please, take yourself off mute and introduce yourself. Let us know who's talking, and fire away.
All quiet.
Hi, it's Brahman English here. I was just wondering, those DFMC signs that are coming out, I think on it said something about farmer owned and farmer run or something along those lines, or farmer owned and farmer run. Is there an opportunity to put Australia in there somewhere? Since the COVID-19 and all this, to do about China and everything, there seems to be quite a push about Australian, and if we can promote that, it's Australian farmers that are producing the milk. We might be owned by a foreign company, but it's still Australians that are in there at the ground level doing all the work and putting money back into our communities and everything.
Yeah, that's a good point, Bronwyn.
Good point. Yep, great point.
And I think in some ways it's being addressed by Lion and their continuing marketing, isn't it? Those ads that we've just been shown are about trying to reinforce the support for local farmers and commerce. So it's a good point. It's a really good point. And it has been heightened, hasn't it? This whole COVID situation has heightened the reasons that have been cited by the Treasurer for not letting the deal go through a food security and national interest, which is on the big scale. But at a consumer level, the sentiment is much more local, isn't it?
Well, it is.
Who am I supporting? Who's getting the milk to me and how? And yeah.
And like up here, we have I don't know what you would call them, another processor, and they seem to have taken the tack with their advertising and their social media, very much about being an Australian business sort of thing. And I know a lot of us have been onto their page and more or less pointed out that we are Australian, like the farmers that produce milk and provide for dairy farmers up here. We are Australian. We are family owned. We are generations of dairy farmers that have done this. We provide, put back money into our community. Our kids go to school here and all of this sort of thing. And I just think it's so important to really get it out there that, yeah, we may be foreign owned, but the farmers are Australian, we pay our taxes, we employ local people, we put back to our community. It doesn't all go overseas. So anything that we can do that has Australian in it, I think it just has to be beneficial.
That's a good point, Bronwyn, and your involvement with that line campaign is terrific and underscores that point. We'll have a look. I suppose I might just point out that quite obviously these signs will be at your farm gates, and so it's implied that it's a local business because the business is behind the sign, beyond the gate that it's on. But yeah, no, that's a good point, and we should never miss an opportunity to underscore that point, because and certainly, as Andrew mentioned when we spoke to the treasurer, or wrote, it was about making sure they understood the point that the regional businesses that supply the milk and then the regional businesses that process the milk are very, very important too. So thank you.
We got another question.
I can see a camera on and a microphone off. Is that a state of readiness?
Frank Huda.
Hello, Frank.
Yep. I'd rather use the word local than Australian. I think all our products sold locally, and I think the locals are happy to support the local industries and the local families.
Yeah. No, that's even stronger. That's I agree. And quite obviously, the Lion campaign is regional. So some of that marketing that we showed you will be different in each region. There won't be there'll be local farmers quite obviously as the spokespeople and the photography, etc. And even the telly ad, the TV commercial, does have the final frames that are region specific. So whilst the dairy site and so on, much of that is the same, the finishing frames are very local as well. To make so Lion and their marketing people get your point, Frank. It's not just generic.
Okay, we got a couple more questions. All right, well, we might sign off there then, Mark. Thank you, everybody, for your time this morning. The recording will be available later on today, and I will email it out to everybody. So if you know of anybody that has missed today and hasn't got an email from me, please ask them to give me a call. So, yeah.